Hello and welcome to Series 4, Episode 7. I had to check my notes then. Of In Suspense, a podcast and vodcast for fans and writers of crime fiction. I'm Leslie Cara and my co-host is the delightful Lauren North.
Hello.
Now, on our last show, we had a really interesting conversation with Olivia Kiernan, and the topic was police procedurals. And we've had some great feedback on that one from on our Twitter account. So we really enjoyed speaking to Olivia, loved having her on. But just it's reminded me, with the feedback coming in on Twitter, that for those of you who do tune in regularly and listen to Lauren and I prattle on, or rather, you're probably tuning in to listen to our guests actually and learning from them rather than the nonsense we come up with.
Definitely.
Those of you who do tune in regularly and who enjoy the show, we'd love it if you would be kind enough to leave us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast platform you listen on. I mean, obviously, only if it's an exceptionally good review, because, we're not interested in 3 stars, are we? No. But today we have another phenomenal guest, and they just keep on coming, don't they, Lauren? We
Yes.
can't keep track of them all. We really can't. And our subject for today is how to be a literary powerhouse. Now, normally, what we do is we decide on a topic, don't we? And then we discuss who would be the best guest to ask on to discuss that particular.
And then we go and beg them to come on.
We beg them. And but this time it was a bit different, wasn't it? Because we're both huge fans of the guest that's coming on today. And when we first sort of formulated the thought of inviting her on, the topic kind of suggested itself.
Yeah.
And you'll know why we're saying that when we tell you that our guest today is none other than the incredible, best-selling international superstar, Sophie Hannah. We can't wait because we're both huge fans of Sophie.
Yes.
We just can't wait. But before we do that, we're going to keep you waiting a little bit longer because Laurie and I need to have our catch up. It's an integral part of the show. No matter how thrilling the guest is, we have to catch up. So Laurie, what's been happening down your way?
Not a lot. I think it's going to be quite a brief catch up on my part. I feel like all I've been doing is writing since I was last here with you. But I finished Nano last week, NaNoWriMo. So I got my 50,000 words under my belt.
Well done.
Thank you. I hated it and I cried several times through the whole process, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I just found it really hard. And I think it's just so unnatural to write at that pace consistently for that length of time and not to take a break here and there. And I found it quite a struggle, I think. So I don't see myself doing it again, but famous last words and all that. But I am going to be finishing my first draft of my book today, which is very exciting for me. So that'll be good just before Christmas to have that all done. And other than that, I just feel like I'm gearing up for Christmas, really. So not much is going on, lots of shopping online at the moment, but nothing quite as exciting about what's happening to you, Leslie. Do you want to share your exciting news?
Well, yes, I have become a grandmother for the first time. Which is, it's hard to believe, really, isn't it, that I could possibly be a grandmother, someone as obviously young as myself, says she jokingly. No, if by some freak of nature, time continuum loop or something, it's happened. I am a grandmother. And I couldn't be more delighted. No, my stepson and his partner have just had a lovely little baby boy, and they've named him Phoenix Heath. They're obviously both movie buffs, as you probably...
Such a nice name. He's going to be so cool. Already can say that about him. Yes. There's no doubt.
Absolutely. When they first said on the phone that they were going to call him Phoenix, I thought they said Felix. I was equally delighted at Felix, but then Phoenix. So no, it's great. It's a great name. and he's a gorgeous little baby. We haven't actually seen him yet, but the minute we finished recording with Sophie today, Rashid and I, we've got our cases packed already, and we're just ready to get in the car and drive off to see them, and we can't wait to get our hands on him. Really.
How far away are they?
It's about a 2-hour drive, so not too bad.
You'll be cutting the questions short today, like hurrying Sophie along a bit. Like, come on.
No, I don't think we'll hurry Sophie along. Don't you worry. But no, I mean, we could have gone last week, but you know what it's like. First week home from hospital, they had lots of other visitors, her parents and things. So we thought, well, let them have a week, get used to being at home.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're doing today, which is kind of, I mean, I don't know if I'm using it as an excuse for not having completed Nano. I don't know whether that's a good thing to say or not. But I mean, to be honest, I realised that Nano isn't for me. It's so, I mean, I was busy obviously with all the news and things going on with my parents, but you know, if I'd really wanted to do it, I would have made myself. It just goes against my method of writing, and I just learnt that it wasn't for me. I as you said, it's difficult writing that many words a day, and it seemed like putting myself under unnecessary pressure.
Yeah.
And I am making progress on book 5. I'm making my normal, slow but steady progress, which is obviously the way I prefer to work. So I'm not going to beat myself up about not getting the badge. But I congratulate you, Laurie. That's absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. Yes, no, I completely agree. I think it wasn't natural. I don't think. I think you and I both enjoyed the first week of it, though, didn't we? Whereas I think that really set the ball rolling for us. And then I think after that week, we both.
It's a bit like, you know, your New Year's resolutions, and you're all great for a couple of weeks, and then you slide back into your old ways. Yeah, but you kept going, so you know, power to you.
Thank you. Well, but before we talk to Sophie today, we should probably unpick that term, literary powerhouse, and sort of think about what it means.
That is a very good idea, Lauren. Off you go then.
Thank you for putting me on the spot. What do I think it means? So definitely someone who's written quite a lot, you know, large volume of work. Someone with an enormous drive and lots of energy, is going to always keep working. Someone who isn't afraid of the industry and staying in their genre and is happy to branch out and try new things. And someone who you just know you're going to pick up their book and it's going to be amazing. I think it's a really good one as well, isn't it? And someone who's inspirational to others as well. I mean, and I think that's definitely the case in Sophie's part, which is one of the things we want to talk to her about, isn't it? Because she's so inspirational. So I think that covers it. Anything else?
I think that's a really good definition. And I'd probably add someone who isn't solely motivated by commercial success, but who has a real passion for, as you said, a drive, a passion for literature, and who basically achieves more in their writing career than most of us could ever dream of, which basically sums up Sophie, doesn't it? So without further ado, let's get her on the show. Sophie Hannah.
Welcome Sophie. Hello, Sophie Hannah, and welcome to In Suspense. We're delighted to be talking to you today. But first, I need to read your bio so that those very few people at home who don't know about you will soon find out.
It's lovely to be joining you.
Thank you. Yes, and Leslie and I both said we're very excited already. So yes, very, very excited. So Sophie Hannah is a Sunday Times and New York Times best-selling writer of crime fiction, published in 49 languages and 51 territories. Her books have sold millions of copies worldwide. In 2014, with the blessing of Agatha Christie's family and estate, Sophie published a new Poirot novel, The Monogram Murders, which was a bestseller in more than 15 countries. She has since published 3 more Poirot novels, Closed Casket, The Mystery of Three Quarters, and The Killing at Kingfisher Hill, all of which were instant Sunday Times top 10 bestsellers. In 2013, Sophie's novel The Carrier won the Crime Thriller of the Year award at Specsavers National Book Awards. She has also published 2 short story collections and 5 collections of poetry, the 5th of which, Pessimism for Beginners, was shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Award. Her poetry is studied at GCSE A-level and degree level across the UK. Most recently, she has published 2 self-help books called How to Hold a Grudge, From Resentment to Contentment, The Power of Grudges to Transform Your Life, and Happiness, a Mystery, and 66 Attempts to Solve It. Sophie has also helped to create a master's degree in crime and thriller writing at the University of Cambridge, for which she is the main teacher and course director. She is also the founder of the Dream Author coaching program for writers. She lives with her husband, children, and a dog called Brewster in Cambridge, where she is an honorary fellow of Lucy Cavendish College. Sophie, we normally start by asking our guests to tell us a little bit about their most recent novel, which I know is The Killing at Kingfisher Hill for you. But since we'll be talking about Poirot a little bit later on, do you think you could tell us a little bit about one of your standalones, Haven't They Grown, which I absolutely loved, and would love to hear you talk about it a bit more, please.
Yeah, so actually, Haven't They Grown is my most recently published novel, because The Killings at Kingfisher Hill came out in paperback this year, but in hardback in 2020, whereas Haven't They Grown in hardback, I think, in January this year. So I think of Haven't They Grown as my most recent book. And it is a standalone. It's a psychological thriller. And it starts when the protagonist, who is a middle-aged married woman called Beth is driving her son Ben to his football match, and it's an away match, so she's going to a different town. And she knows that her friend's new house, her ex-best friend, and the friendship ended in very mysterious circumstances. So her ex-best friend's brand new house is very near the football ground. So she thinks, I will go and have a nosy at my ex-friend's new house. While she's there, her ex-best friend, Flora, returns in the car, and Beth sees her get out of the car and open the back door of the car, and she hears her say, come on, Thomas, come on, Emily, out you get, in a very jolly sort of babyish voice. And Beth knows that Thomas and Emily, Flora's children, must be great big galumphing teenagers by now, because the last time she saw them, they were tiny toddlers, and that was 12 years ago. So she hasn't had any contact with this family since the big breakup of the friendship 12 years ago. And she thinks to herself, oh my goodness, why is she still talking to them as though they're 3 and 5 years old? And then she watches in astonishment as toddler Thomas and toddler Emily step out of the car, and they appear still to be 3 and 5 years old. They're even wearing the same clothes that Beth last saw them wearing 12 years ago. And it looks very much as though they have not aged or grown at all in 12 years. Hence the title, Haven't They Grown? Now, Beth, I should say, is not an unreliable narrator. She's not someone who halfway through the book is going to go, oh, I've just remembered I was drunk and I didn't really see what I thought I saw. She's, in fact, an incredibly reliable narrator. That isn't a spoiler. She knows, as well as everyone who tells her, that what she's seen is impossible. She knows that children not growing for 12 years is a thing that just doesn't happen. Yet she also is completely certain of what she saw. And so while everyone is discouraging her to stay away from this very weird and frankly implausible can of worms, Beth is convinced that something is very, very wrong and sets out to find out the truth, and is soon plunged into a nightmare.
Amazing. I have chills. I think I read the book in a day. I just couldn't put it down. It was absolutely sensational.
Me too.
I think it is one of my favourites of all the books I've written for various reasons. But one of the reasons, you know how, I mean, you must get this as well. We never want to really read our books once they're published because we've read them 50,000 times in the process. But I think most writers tend to write the books that they know they would love most if only they hadn't written them, or rather they set out to write the books they know they would love most if only they hadn't written them. And that's what I did with Haven't They Grown? So when I had the idea, I thought, oh, if that was a book by not me, I would have to buy it that day. I would have to drop everything and just find out what the hell's going on. And so knowing that that was how I would feel, I extrapolated and thought probably other people will feel this way as well. And it turned out to be true. This book has sold significantly more than I think any of my books in an equivalent period, apart from obviously the first Poirot novel, but that's different because that was kind of Agatha selling that rather than me. But this book has really done brilliantly sales-wise, and I'm sure it's because of that hook.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's a brilliant book. I could not put it down. And I mean, what I love about that book and about all your books, Sophie, all your standalones and all your series, your Charlie and Simon and Charlie books, is that you present us with a seemingly impossible puzzle, a question that almost sort of defies logic, really. And you've written so many thrillers now. I don't know exactly how many, but you've written so many standalones, and you've also written a series, haven't you? The Simon Waterhouse, Charlie Zayler, which features a married detective couple, and I think that's been made into a TV series now, hasn't it? Case Sensitive, is that right?
Well, it wasn't really. So in 2011 and 2012, two of the books in that series were made into sort of little TV dramas, but it didn't. It wasn't. I can't remember what they called it, but they definitely didn't call it a series. But it also wasn't a one-off. They had some funny name for it, but yeah. But that was a long time ago. I can actually tell you this. I haven't announced this yet.
Ooh,
breaking news!
I won't tell anyone else, and then it can be announced on the podcast. In the last week to fortnight, I have signed a TV deal with an amazing producer, director person for Haven't They Grown to be made into a TV drama.
Oh, congratulations.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Really exciting. And the woman who approached my agent about it, she's so amazing. She's so enthusiastic. She just loves it. And we email all the time. So I've got a really good feeling about it. I mean, as with all these things, who knows whether it ever ends up on screen. Signing the option deal is one thing, and then who knows what happens next. But
I'm sure it will.
Looking good at this point.
That's really great. Congratulations. A first for the show to announce.
Great exclusive.
That's brilliant. So can you tell us, Sophie, how you first came to write crime fiction and which book of yours it was that sort of first set you off in this particular direction?
Well, so I've always been an avid reader of mysteries since about the age of 6, when I discovered Enid Blyton's Secret 7 novels. I can remember thinking mysteries are just the best kind of story. And I started to pretty much read nothing but mysteries. I did have a phase in my teens when I read lots of kind of blockbustery, Shirley Conran, Jackie Collins, all those kind of books, which I loved as well. But then I did return to my first love of mystery fiction, got hooked on Agatha Christie, then got hooked on Ruth Rendell. So from about the age of 16, I knew that I wanted to write mystery stories, and I was trying to get them published. So between the ages of 16 and 20, I wrote 3 novels, 2 of which were, I wrote 4. 2 of them were sort of love stories about basically me falling in love with unsuitable boys. And 2 of them were crime fiction, very unsophisticated and immature. But I sent them everywhere. So by the time I was 20, I had like 40 rejection letters from every publisher in town. And that was fine. Like, I never made that mean that I couldn't make it eventually. I was just like, okay, clearly I'm not good enough yet. And I really wasn't good enough yet. Then I had about 10 years where I didn't try to write crime fiction at all, even though I was reading it avidly, because around the time that all my crime novels were being rejected, when I was like 19, 20, I was actually starting to have lots of success with writing poetry. And I was becoming a very popular on the gig circuit and best-selling poet. I mean, being a best-selling poet is relative, like it's not the same as being a best-selling novelist, but nevertheless, I wrote poems that rhymed, scanned, and made sense, and were generally about, unsuitable boys I'd fallen in love with. So they were accessible at a time when a lot of poetry just seemed to be purely descriptive, free verse that, festival organisers would contact me and say, we'd love you to come and talk to our festival, even though you write those silly rhyming things, but at least our audience will be entertained, because the highbrow stuff was not really entertaining very many people. So I kind of got completely into the poetry world, which was great. And then I only returned to writing crime fiction when I had my first baby. And the experience of the whole sort of surrounding experience of having this baby gave me the idea for what was to become my first published crime novel, which was a book called Little Face, about a woman who insists that her baby has been swapped for another baby, and her husband equally insists that it hasn't, and that she's gone mad or is lying. And the police are trying to make sense of this. Is it the same baby? Is it not the same baby? So that was Little Face, that was published in 2006. And I remember lying in the hospital after having had my daughter, having the idea for Little Face, because I thought, I need a crime writing career fairly urgently, or I'll have to do some childcare, which I did not want to do. So I remember lying there, having the idea and thinking, that is definitely a psychological thriller, this idea. It's not a poem. It's not a collection of poems. And I thought, I'll just have one last try, because I'd kind of, over the 10 years when I'd been only a poet, I'd kind of been absolutely fine with the thought that, maybe I'm not cut out to write crime fiction. I can still read it and love it, but maybe it's not where my talents in writing lie. But then when I had this idea that I found so compelling, I thought, got to give it one more try. And if this doesn't work, then I'll maybe decide that I'll stick to poetry or write different novels. And that became Little Face, and it got published in 2006. And what was really interesting was Hodder, when my agent submitted it to Hodder and Stoughton, they loved it. They called us in for a meeting, and they were so enthusiastic about it. It was just like one of the best days of my life. It was literally one of the happiest days of my life, because everyone in the whole Hodder building kind of gathered, not literally everyone, but it felt as though there was this kind of welcoming committee of people coming up, and they hadn't even bought it yet or offered for it. This was just the come in for a chat meeting, and there were people coming up to saying, I loved Little Face. Oh, I loved Little Face too. So that was amazing. But I remember my not yet editor, who is now my editor and has been for the last sort of 15 years or whatever, I remember her saying to me, we absolutely love this book, and we are going to, make the biggest success of it that we can, but please don't expect it to be a commercial bestseller, because it's very subtle, and it's kind of a bit not literary, but like it's well written and quite sophisticated, but it's also very plotty. But don't expect it to sort of go to number one. We have bought in for the long term, and we want to build you up gradually. And I was like, amazing, this sounds great. I certainly wasn't expecting it to be a bestseller. And I think my not yet editor said, we'll be really happy if we can sell 10,000 copies. For a first novel, that is a great number. And I was like, wow, yeah, I'd be really happy with that too. And I totally would have been. Anyway, so it came out in August 2006. And for the first, I would say, month to month and a half, it sold sort of average numbers per week, round about what I was expecting to be sort of on track for a first 6 months sales of 10,000 copies. And then, for no apparent reason, it just took off. And by Christmas, it had sold 40,000 copies.
Wow.
And by 6 months later, it had sold 80,000 copies. And I think it was a combination of great reviews. I mean, the Times chose it as their book of the week one week. A combination of great reviews and the hook of like, mother thinks her baby's been swapped, and word of mouth. And it just became a word of mouth bestseller, and it just sold and sold and sold. I mean, I think now it's in its something like 160th print. I mean, it's just, wow. It just took off. So then there was an angle, word of mouth bestseller, and that of course makes everything easier, because everyone's talking about it. And people kept saying to me, like, every agent, every publisher is saying, who else can we publish that's a bit like Sophie Hannah? And I think it was this kind of domestic thriller, slightly flawed main character, that what we now think of as the standard really popular kind of psychological thriller, Little Face becoming a bestseller was kind of the very beginning of that. And then that movement grew. So the next one was Before I Go to Sleep by S.J. Watson,
Yes.
which was huge. Then Gone Girl, which was even huger. Then The Girl on the Train, which was huge. And that was probably like the peak of that, travel in that direction of the crime novel. Sort of
Sophie,
go
thank goodness you did write it then. Thank goodness you persevered and wrote it, because, all these things that have happened since then, that's absolutely amazing. I mean,
I not only had to persevere and write it in the first place, but then when I'd written it, I had to persevere a bit more, because my agent at the time, and she wasn't an agent who had ever chosen me, but my original literary agent had retired. Well, she hadn't. She'd gone into another business, but she wasn't being an agent anymore. And the agency where she had worked had employed a new partner, and I was assigned to this new agent. And when I sent her the first 100 pages of Little Face and a synopsis of the rest, she said, I don't like this at all. I can't imagine anyone ever wanting to read it. There's no mystery in it. There's no suspense in it. And I said, okay, wait, let me just check here, because this sounds really weird to me. The mysteries are, has the baby been swapped? Who murdered the husband's first wife? And where have the mother and baby disappeared to? Because they disappear after. And all of this happens in the first chapter. So I was like, there's 3 really massive mysteries, and I don't get what she means. So I said, what about this, this, and this? And she said, well, I don't care about whether a baby's been swapped or not, because I don't have any children. And I thought, I think I need to get a new agent.
Yeah,
definitely.
Probably need a new agent.
That shows how how important believing in yourself and being assertive is, and then we'll come on to that a little bit later on in the show when we talk about your dream author. But I mean, I was just wondering, before we go on to the next question, how do you actually decide what to write next, having written so many? Do you follow your heart and your instincts when you're choosing your next creative project, or do you think, it's about time I wrote another standalone, or I need to get Hercule Poirot out of the cupboard because he needs to exercise his little grey cells, or is it time for a Charlie and a Simon and Charlie novel? How do you decide what to do next?
Well, for a long time after Little Face, it was kind of obvious what I was going to do next, because when Hodder took me on, they offered me a 2-book contract, and they said, we'd like the second book to be of the same genre as the first. So I thought, right, well, another psychological thriller, but with recurring, because Simon and Charlie were in Little Face. That was their first outing. I thought, right, another outing for Simon and Charlie, but a different protagonist in a different situation. And then that did really well. That was a bestseller as well. And it was also one of the books that I'm sort of proudest of as a novel. And so I didn't then question what I was doing. I thought of which plot idea excites me most to do next. But in terms of what kind of book I was going to write, it was going to be a Simon and Charlie psychological thriller. And I just thought, which idea am I most compelled by at the time when I need to write a new book? Hodder, it was quite funny actually, at the very first meeting with Hodder, Carolyn Mays, who has been my amazing editor since Little Face, she said, so we love Little Face and we really want to build you up. Can you write a thriller kind of like Little Face but different for us once a year? And just as I was about to open my mouth and go, once a year? I mean, really? That's because this was 2005. We were having this conversation. Digital publishing hadn't taken off yet. And we didn't all know in those days that there were some writers who write 4 books a year for Thomas and Mercer or Bookouture. It was an older period of history. So just as I was about to open my mouth and go, 1 a year? I was thinking of having a bit of a rest. I heard my agent chip in and say, yes, no problem, she can easily do that, which was a smart move. And I kind of went, yes, well, I guess I can, just because that is what I tend to do. Like if someone says to me, can you do this really challenging thing? I tend to go, yes, I can, and then work out the details later. So I would say for about 7 or 8 years, I just looked for plot ideas, but I knew it was going to be a Simon and Charlie. Then I was asked to write a supernatural thriller by Hammer. The Hammer Film Company, in conjunction with Random House, wanted to commission and publish a series of short, ghostly or ghost or horror genre novellas. And I was approached by Random House and Hammer and asked if I wanted to do one. And I found that I really, really did, because I love ghost story. I mean, I'm not interested in horror, but I love ghost stories. And I realized that the reason I love them is because they are generally mysteries. Generally, in a ghost story, you know, a window bangs or a door rattles, but you don't know who the ghost is or why they're around. Like, there's no popular ghost stories that start with someone turning up and going, "Hi, I'm the ghost, and let me tell you why I've come back. It's because I'm a bit cross about some stuff that happened when I was alive." Like, that just never happens. So I really love the idea of the mystery element of a ghost story. So I wrote a one-off standalone supernatural thriller called The Orphan Choir, which is genuinely terrifying. I can't, writing it terrified me. I wanted to give it a slightly happy ending, and my editor quite rightly said, "No, it's been so scary. I think you want to ratchet up the scariness all the way to the end." I was like, "All right then." But finishing that book was really terrifying. So I wrote that, and then I thought, it seems that I can write other kinds of books. So then I thought, what about a standalone? And then I was obviously, the whole Christie thing happened. So now I would say I still go on, what do I want to write next? But I also have got into the pattern now where I sign contracts for books before I've written them. So obviously I have to cooperate with both Hodder and HarperCollins and find out when they would like the books to come out.
Amazing. And talking of the Agatha Christie books, so we know that you're commissioned by Agatha Christie Limited to write the Hercule Poirot novels. So how did that opportunity come about? Did you approach them or did they approach you? Can you talk us through how that happened?
Yes, neither of those ways was how I would never have dreamed of having the idea that I should write Poirot novels or approaching the Christie family, any more than I would dream of like ringing up Buckingham Palace and saying, "Hey, should I be the next queen?" I think that's a good idea. Just would never have occurred to me. And it would never have occurred to the Christie family to ask me, because I don't think they'd heard of me for a second. So how it came about was, I have a very brilliant, but also amusingly maverickish literary agent. His name is Peter Strauss. He knows I tell this story about him wherever I go, and if sometimes he's there and he chuckles along as I describe him. But he's a real maverick. You know, he just doesn't do things in the way other people do. And in fact, if you've watched House, you know, the Hugh Laurie medical drama where he plays Dr. House, my agent is basically like Dr. House, but of the literary world. He's a brilliant genius, and he just does whatever he wants in a way that doesn't always fit in with what people are expecting. And his name is Strauss, which rhymes with house. So I think that's very apt. He was in a meeting at HarperCollins. He remembered halfway through this meeting, which was nothing to do with me or Agatha Christie, some other books were being discussed, and he just remembered that Agatha Christie was published by HarperCollins and that I was an Agatha fan. And he just interrupted the meeting, which was, you know, about somebody else and their book. And he said, "Hey, why don't you get my author, Sophie Hannah, to write new Christie brand novels? She's a massive fan. You should have had this idea already." And HarperCollins said, no, the family definitely don't want anyone else writing new Christie brand books. But then the very next day, HarperCollins had their regular meeting with the Christie family to talk about Agatha's publishing operation. And at that meeting, Matthew Pritchard, who is Agatha's grandson and who at the time was chairman of Agatha Christie Limited, Matthew said to HarperCollins, "This is going to really surprise you after our great reluctance for many decades, but we are now thinking we might want to commission a new Poirot."
Wow.
At which point HarperCollins said, "Well, this is very strange. We had an agent in here yesterday who reckons he's got an author who would love to do that." And so a meeting was arranged and we got on brilliantly. And we eventually, after doing lots of, you know, how would we do this and how would we approach that, we all decided we wanted to do it. And it's been just an amazingly happy working relationship. So I've written 4 books for the Christie family so far. I'm just about to start writing my 5th. That's my next writing project. And like, it's just been a dream. We haven't disagreed about anything. You know, people have said to me, "Do you have to get them to approve your plot ideas?" And like, originally they said, could we possibly see a plot? And I was like, yes, I really want you to see my plot idea, because the last thing I want to do is write something and then have you not like it. So here's what I'm thinking. And everything I told them, they're like, yes, we love that idea. Whenever they've had editorial suggestions, I've loved their ideas. So it's just been really, really great fun and working really well.
I would love to have been a fly on the wall when your agent called you up and said, oh, I know we've not mentioned this before, but you can now write Agatha Christie. That must have been
First of all, he rang me up and said, I thought of this brilliant idea and I suggested it. And sorry, I'll start that line again. First of all, he rang me up and said, I had this brilliant idea and I suggested it to HarperCollins and they said, definitely not. No way will this ever happen. And I was a bit annoyed with my agent at that point, because I was like, look, I didn't ask you to suggest this. And now, completely needlessly, you have created an opportunity for me to be rejected for something that I would never have thought to apply for in the first place. Like, please don't make a habit of that. But then he rang the next day and said, well, the Christie family want to meet you. I said, why? I thought we'd established this wasn't happening. He was like, yeah, I know, it's weird, isn't it? But I guess we have to go along to the meeting. So we went to the meeting. I didn't even know what it was about. I thought they were going to tick me off and say, stay away from Agatha. And I was all prepared to just point at my agent and go, listen, this has nothing to do with me. It's all his fault.
amazing. And it must have been quite nerve-wracking to write that first one. And even after that, you've got this huge weight of responsibility for Agatha Christie fans. How did you cope with that?
I just didn't think about it in that way. I mean, if I'd have decided this is a huge burden, I should be scared, I should be worried, then I probably would have been scared and worried. But instead I thought, I'm just going to think of it as a really exciting creative challenge that I would love to do just on a purely, writing adventure kind of way. And I love Agatha Christie. And I trust that I'm a decent writer and I will do the best job that I possibly can. So I decided just to feel honoured and excited. And I mean, people say, was it daunting? Like, I guess daunting is one way you could describe it, but I just found it very energizing and inspiring to think that I was doing this in the service of the greatest crime writer who's ever lived and the greatest fictional detective. Like, it just felt exciting and thrilling. And, of course, I knew that lots of people would say, oh, but it's not Agatha Christie, or how dare you do it? Like, I knew that there would be a mixed reaction, but I decided, like, that's totally fine. People are allowed. There are probably people who, if it was announced that they were writing a Poirot novel, I, as an Agatha fan, would be like, no, I disapprove of this. So everyone's allowed to have their reaction. But I thought, because my motives were so good, like I just wanted to kind of almost make the first book like a kind of love letter to Agatha from a devoted fan, and to create something that all my fellow Agatha superfans could enjoy if they wanted to. I just thought it can't go wrong if it feels, it's like that Buddhist thing, isn't it, of right thought, right action. I'm probably getting Buddhism wrong there, but when you're doing something feeling so great and for such great reasons, you kind of feel as though, what's the worst that could happen? And I thought, actually, what is the worst that can happen? I write a book that's no good, in which case the family will for sure tell me it's no good and say this won't do and hire someone else, in which case no harm is done. But I wanted to try.
Amazing. And so you've got that relationship now. Do you see yourself carrying on writing them for the foreseeable future?
I don't know, because I never really think beyond the next one. Although I did have a 2-book contract at one point. I think Mystery of Three Quarters and The Killings at Kingfisher Hill were on the same contract. So then I thought as far ahead as 2. But for this contract, it was a 1-book contract. And so I think it's hard to know how I'm going to feel after this book has come out, this next one, because it's only coming out in 2023. And that's a long way off. And I've got various books I want to write. I'm kind of getting a bit more, well, 2 things, a bit more ambitious in terms of like, there are book ideas that I've had for a while that I've not even really considered writing because they just felt a bit too too much as though they'd like stretch me. They were like new and ambitious projects, which it's always, I'm sure you found this as well, it's just always easier not to do those projects, do kind of projects you're used to doing. But now I'm kind of thinking, kind of want to do these really ambitious projects. And I'm also, in the last, I don't know, 6 months to a year, I've started to think, I really want to choose really carefully what books I write. Because I've written so many, it used to be just like, I'll write another one. But now I kind of think, look, I could just never write a book again, and everyone could just reread my backlist, and there's still plenty for them to be getting on with. So for me to commit to writing a book, I have to feel really driven and passionate about writing it. So I think I'm going to be making choices based on that. I mean, I always have to a certain extent, but until now, it's always been more of a balance between what do I think readers want and what do I want. So I've got a new book coming out in January 27th, called The Couple at the Table. And that is a Simon and Charlie. That's the first Simon and Charlie for several years. So I knew I wanted to write another Simon and Charlie. But in my head, when I was planning writing this next Simon and Charlie, I had a completely different book in mind. But when it came time to start writing it, it just so happened that I'd had an idea for a new story that I was just so fired up and passionate about. And I just said to my editor, I have to write this new one. It's still going to be Simon and Charlie, but I'm completely changing the entire, forget about that last outline I sent you. I'm doing a completely different book. And it made it so much more of a pleasure to write because I just had to tell this story. So I kind of want to feel like that about all the books I write from now on.
I think that's really great. If you're fired up to write it, it's going to be good because the passion will come through. If you force yourself to write something you're not 100% behind, then that's going to show, isn't it? But I mean, that links us nicely into our topic today, which is how to be a literary powerhouse. And your bio, as Lauren has just read out, we can see that you've created such an impressive body of work, long and short fiction, non-fiction, poetry. You've even now branched out into podcasting because you've got your wonderful How to Hold a Grudge podcast. And I think you're also writing murder mystery musicals now as well.
Yeah, well, since that has come up, I've written co-written with my musician and composer friend Annette Armitage. We've co-written 2 murder mystery musicals called The Mystery of Mr. E and Work Experience. That's the second one. And the first of them, the Mystery of Mr. E, next year is being turned into a movie.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, it's not a secret, you can tell whoever you want, but I haven't officially announced it because there's going to be a proper announcement PR campaign, but it's fine, like it's not embargoed or anything.
So
but
that means we've got 2 announcements.
Is it going to be a musical?
Amazing.
Are they going to be singing?
It's going to be.
Wow.
Have you seen The Greatest Showman?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's going to be like that, a proper, I mean, nothing like that in any other way, but a proper movie musical. It's not being made by Hollywood, it's being made by an independent British filmmaker, but it has a decent budget, and there's going to be singing and dancing. And in terms of the kind of thing it is, it's very this isn't exactly like what it is, but if you imagine Agatha Christie's The Mousetrap mixed with the musical Matilda and with 13 catchy songs, that's kind of where we're at. So all the action takes place. There's a horrible school in it. That's why I made the Matilda reference. There's a very traditional country house puzzle, closed community murder mystery, and there's 13 catchy songs, of which all of the lyrics are by me, but some of the tunes were thought of by me as well. Because what happened was, Annette was going to do the music, I was going to do the words, but she wanted me to do the words first and then send them to her and she'd set them to music. And what I found was when I started writing the lyrics for some of the songs, tunes occurred to me. So I would then record myself singing them a cappella and send them to Annette. And sometimes she'd say, I don't think this tune works. I'm going to do a completely different one. And other times she'd say, yeah, this is amazing. Let's go with this. And then she'd just turn my tune into proper sheet music, you know. So yeah, so that is going to be, it's filming next year and will be ready for release in 2023.
That's brilliant.
Can I just jump in and ask a quick question? Because I watched Jack Reacher's the movie by Lee Childs recently, and he had a cameo in it. And I said to my son, "That's Lee Child." So I just wondered, are you going to try and get a little cameo part yourself? Just a little
yeah.
part.
Well, as things stand, I am meant to be playing a pushy school mum.
Wow. You're talented.
I may get fired. The director keeps telling me that as things stand, I can play. She's called Pamelin Voss. And as things stand, I'm playing Pamelin Voss, but he keeps telling me that if he finds a better Pamelin Voss, then he's going to...
He won't find a
Well, that's my view. I keep saying that no one could be a better Pamelin Voss than me.
Sophie, what is it about you and your particular approach to your writing career that you think enables you to excel in so many different creative projects? I mean, this is no time for modesty. What is it about you that enables you to do all this?
I mean, okay, I think anyone who is going to do a lot or a lot of different things or a lot in a particular field, one of the things you need to be able to do is kind of work efficiently and make good use of time and energy. So the whole sort of scheduling time energy equation and working, doing the most amount of valuable work in the least amount of time, that is the skill that you need to cultivate. And I think more than anything else, what's enabled me to get really good at that is that I've been trying to do various things of a writing related kind since I was 7 or 8. I was writing things like little poems and little stories like as a kid. Then from definitely the age of 16, I was writing novels and trying to get them published. And then even if we sort of say, well, let's start with Little Face. So when I wrote Little Face, it took me about 3 years. Let me think. My daughter was born in November 2002, and Little Face was ready to be submitted in February 2005. So all that time in between was me doing pretty much nothing but trying to get Little Face right. And that took 3 years, and it was all I was doing. Now, from starting a first draft to having a really good finished version can be as little as 2 months. And everything else I do has just been a result of deciding I want to do something, trying to do it, and using all the lessons I've learned in terms of how to work efficiently and maximize productivity while not draining myself of all energy. So, I mean, I think the simple answer is it's a combination of desire to do lots of things. Like, I could have probably been quite happy only writing crime novels. But when I had the idea to write a supernatural mystery and a self-help book about how holding grudges is actually quite good for us and a podcast, when I have these ideas, I always think, oh yeah, I'd really love to do that. And it gets me sort of creatively inspired and excited. And then because I'm naturally optimistic, instead of thinking, oh, no, I can't possibly, it'll be too much, I think, of course I can do that thing. And I mean, this has always been my natural tendency, but it's a useful one to have. Because if I go through life thinking, of course I can create that thing I want to create, then I'm going to try. And if I try, I might mess it up a few times. But if I keep trying, then I'm more likely to succeed than if I decided it was too much and didn't try at all. So I think it's a combination of massive kind of eyes are bigger than stomach syndrome of like, of course I can do that and that and that. Then I don't want to fail, so I try until it succeeds. And all of that then combines with the fact that I've been certainly writing books since regularly since 2002, and I've just become more efficient at it. And in fact, Haven't They Grown was an exception to that, because that I had to rewrite completely. My editor didn't tell me I had to, but I reread it and thought it's not sharp enough, needs to be better. And then I rewrote it and it was so much better. But say The Killings at Kingfisher Hill, I mean, I wrote that book start to finish in 6 weeks.
Wow.
And it's my best Poirot novel. So I've just got really good at doing high quality work in a shorter amount of time. Now, you can't just start doing that when you write your first novel. I wouldn't have known how to do that with Littleface. It just wouldn't have been possible. But you just get better as you go along.
Inspirational, really inspirational.
Absolutely amazing. And you also run the Dream Author Coaching program for writers. And can you summarize the rationale for this program and what prompted you to start doing it?
Yes, I can. Well, so before I say anything else, I will say that the Dream Author Coaching Program has a completely free newsletter. So any of your listeners who are writers and would like to receive, I mean, I don't send out newsletters very often. Usually it's no more than once a quarter, but it may go to once a month. But in the newsletter, I always send out a freebie. Like I'm just about to send one, which is about some thoughts that writers tend to think, which sound like great thoughts for a writer to be thinking, but actually demotivate and discourage writers. So I'll send out a little bit of coaching in each newsletter. So if anyone wants to sign up for that, they can just go to they can go to the Dream Author website, and on the homepage at the bottom, there's a bit that says sign up for the free newsletter. So Dream Author is not a writing course. I always stress that so emphatically, because writers are used to hearing about writing courses, and this is not a writing course. It's a coaching program. Now, once you join, your writing massively improves, but that's not the main focus. The main focus is providing coaching, sort of mindset and emotional coaching for writers in order to help them identify all the ways in which they are currently getting in their own way in terms of what they want. So if you said to most writers, how would you like to feel about your writing and what result would you like to get from it? They'd probably say, I'd like to think everything's going brilliantly, I'm inspired, I love my writing life, and the result I would like to get is regular bestsellers and royalty checks. Let's say that's just an example. And then when you say to them, okay, so that's what you'd like to achieve, what is the current situation? 99.9% of writers will say, their face will fall, and they go, well, I mean, I'm currently thinking, should I actually give up because this is too much of a nightmare? And the result I'm getting is my latest novel's been turned down by X number of publishers. And what inspired me to create a program that deals with the sort of mindset side is that I was having conversation after conversation with writers where they would say things like that. It's all going badly. I'm not enjoying it. I'm on a downward trajectory. I've had 10 rejection letters. The industry is so hard these days. And I could always hear when I had these conversations that these writers I was talking to honestly believed that they were just telling me the facts of the situation. Like, look, these are just the facts. I have no choice but to be discouraged because listen to what's happening. But I could always hear that there might have been some facts in what they were telling me, but a lot of it was what they were making those facts mean. And they would just drop these little beliefs in, and of course, I'm too old now. Well, and of course, no one will be interested because I've got a bad sales track record. And they would just present those things as facts. And of course, there are all these gatekeepers, who don't want to let me in. I'm like, wait, actually, there are no gate. Like, what is that? That's a made up concept. There are some people sitting in offices in publishing houses, but why are we calling them gatekeepers? There's all this sort of room for our own thoughts to mislead us into thinking they're facts. And then we think we have no choice but to be miserable about them. So Dream Author is designed to coach writers so that they can identify what they truly want in their writing lives and then pursue it with the right mindset And it's difficult. It's difficult to always be in the right mindset, which is why Dream Author is a 14-month program. I mean, I could do a 1-hour masterclass and tell everyone everything they need to know, but then 3 weeks later, a letter arrives, they feel terrible, they need regular coaching. So anyone who joins Dream Author can get coached by me within a week, anytime during the whole program. So I'm very passionate about Dream Author because people join it and they go, oh my God, this has transformed my life and my writing life. And like, I know why it does, because most people are getting in their own way with things that they're believing that just are not facts. And by responding to things in a way that is not going to get them the result they want. There's so much more detail. If anyone wants to, I mean, as well as signing up for the newsletter, obviously, on the homepage of the Dream Author website and on the next page, which is called the Dream Author Program, there's loads and loads of videos and examples of coaching, and those 2 pages give you a real flavour of the whole program. And obviously anyone who wants to is welcome to join, because I haven't yet got to the point where I'm limiting entry. I don't want to get to that point, because I want anyone who wants to be able to join. So for now, anyone who wants to can just sign up via the Enroll Now page. But what really made me think, right, I have to create this now, is that I was having breakfast with a writer friend of mine, and I said, how's the writing going? And he just looked so depressed, and he said, I feel terrible, I feel like a failure. He really was in a bad way. And he told me why. He said, well, after my hugely successful book, the next one just didn't sell at all, and then my publisher dropped me. And then he talked for about half an hour about how depressed he was. Sometimes he couldn't get out of bed in the morning. And then, just almost as an afterthought, I said, so presumably while you've been depressed, you haven't been able to do much writing then? And he said, well, oh, no. I mean, I did write a book, and I mean, I've just got a 2-book, 6-figure contract with Pam Macmillan, but, those would probably fail. And I was like, this is interesting. This is a guy who, and I said to him, I could tell you your story using exactly the same facts you've told me, and I could tell a completely different story. First, you had this huge success. Then there was a setback and you felt terrible. But despite feeling terrible, you managed to write a book that attracted Pam Macmillan, a Big 5 publisher, and they gave you a multiple 6-figure contract. So you are someone who is able to create success over and over again, even when you're not feeling at your best. Like, that's amazing. And he looked at me as though like, what is this sorcery going on? And he said, that's really weird. He said, if I thought of it the way you're thinking of it, I wouldn't need to be depressed at all. I was like, exactly. And after that breakfast, I thought, instead of going around saying, why is there no coaching program for writers? I'm going to actually create one.
That's completely amazing. And you've answered all my follow-up questions for it as well, actually. I just want to say that I know a few authors who are on your program, and they just sing your praises and sing the praises of the program. And they certainly, you can tell from just talking to them that they have this amazing mindset for their writing. It is amazing what you do.
And what you were saying, Sophie, about the free, the Dream Author website and the newsletter, and I've listened to you provide a couple of free podcasts, don't you, as well?
Yeah.
And I've listened to both of those, and they really are enlightening. So I'd thoroughly recommend listeners to have a look at that website and to listen to your podcast, because I mean, I just love listening to you because you've got such a wonderful manner and a fabulous voice, and you're incredibly reassuring. You could tell me what to do all day and I'd just obey you, Sophie. You ought to have a program, Sophie Says, and I'd just do it. But no, so I'd thoroughly recommend that. And you mentioned earlier, you've got a new book coming out in January, you mentioned earlier, called The Couple at the Table.
Yeah.
And that sounds like another incredibly brilliant, hooky premise. So I was wondering if you could give us a taster of what that book is.
Well, so The Couple at the Table, it's really interesting because since I started writing the Poirot novels, obviously I've been rereading Christie all the time. And in my psychological thrillers, which are all contemporary, there's always been a sort of vague, well, not even vague. There's always been a Christie influence. Long before I was going to be writing Poirot novels, what I loved about Christie's novels was that she would start with a really unusual premise that you just cannot guess what's going on. And I was doing that with all of my psychological thrillers. So there was already a Christie influence in my contemporary crime fiction. But with The Couple at the Table, I think for the first time in one of my contemporary non-Poirot novels, I've got a very traditionally Christie-ish setup. And I did that deliberately. I wanted The Couple at the Table to offer all the satisfactions of a golden age closed circle puzzle mystery, but with very contemporary content. So Couple at the Table is set at a couples only holiday resort, a very exclusive, small UK-based holiday resort. And it's a couples only resort. And the murder victim is a woman called Jane Brinkwood, who is there at the resort for her honeymoon. And she is murdered. The day before she gets murdered, she receives an anonymous note posted through the door of her holiday cottage. And the note says, "Beware of the couple at the table nearest to yours." And when she goes for her next meal at the resort restaurant, somebody has mysteriously moved all the tables around. And she sits at the table in the middle of a circle of other tables. And actually, that's the only table that's free for her and her husband to sit at. And that table, because it's in the middle of this circle of tables, is not actually nearer to any of the tables than any of the others. So her table, after the tables are mysteriously moved, is equidistant from every other couple's table. So it seems as though this warning anonymous note has no possible meaning or usefulness. So that's kind of the first mystery. Then she gets murdered. And the police soon establish that nobody who was at the resort that night could possibly have killed her. Just physically impossible for a different reason in each case. And yet, the police also quickly established that nobody could have got into the resort from the outside. And so it seems as though literally nobody could have committed this murder. And yet somebody definitely committed it, because Jane Brinkwood is dead, stabbed in the back several times with a kitchen knife.
Wow.
Wow.
That sounds amazing. And it has got that real Agatha Christie feel to it as well. But obviously, it's your Sophie Simon and Charlie one. I just can't wait to read it. It sounds amazing. I've seen some of the proofs being sent out already. So I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it.
Doing the rounds, and it's published on the 27th of January.
Oh, we can't wait to read that. Absolutely can't wait. Sophie, you're such a busy, creative person. I'm surprised you have any time to read, but I bet you are obviously an avid reader. So what we always like to ask our guests what they're reading at the moment, or what's on their TBR pile, or anything they can recommend.
Well, I just read a brilliant crime novel called 9 Lives by Peter Swanson, although it's not out till March, but I believe it's pre-orderable probably by now. And it's a contemporary take on And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. And when I first was sent a proof copy, I thought, okay, it's clearly very obviously a reference and a sort of pastiche of And Then There Were None. So I probably don't want to read it because I've read And Then There Were None and I know what the solution is. But I started reading it. I thought, well, I'll just read the first chapter. And sometimes you just start a book and you think, I have to read on. It was so beautifully written. And then I thought, well, surely it can't have the same exact solution as And Then There Were None. Otherwise, there'd literally be no mystery. And it didn't. So I was glad I read it, because it was, although it had that format of people being bumped off from a kind of set group of 10 or whatever, it didn't have the same explanation. So you couldn't work out who the killer was and why they were killing. So I loved that. It was really, really beautifully written. And I'm just about to start another one of his, the one that was chosen for Richard and Judy recently, called Rules for Perfect Murders.
Oh, yes, I've got that on my shelf, actually. Yes.
Yeah. So, I read a lot. I mean, I read every night in bed for usually about half an hour to an hour. But I'm getting fussier and fussier. I start so many novels and think, well, I can live without reading any more of this. So I I only really finish the ones that I think I have to read this, have to find out what's going on.
And what about you, Lauren? What are you reading at the moment?
I have just finished reading The Mother Bolt by Kate Mildenhall, which I thought was really, really unique and really amazing. It had a real 1984 meets A Brave New World feel to it, but also it's just so nail biting as well. And it's set in this really very realistic world where climate change has just blown up. And it was sensational, really, really gripping.
Well, I've got that on my shelf as well because I think she's coming on, isn't she, the writer?
Yeah, she's coming on next season. I'm trying to get through all the guest book at the moment.
And I've been sent a book called The Replacement by Melanie Golding. She wrote
a
couple of years ago called Little Darlings, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And yes, the tagline is, she says she's the mother, but who is she really? It sounds really good. It's got a great cover, and looking forward to reading that. I'm also going to start. I've had it for ages. Jack Jordan's Do No Harm.
No Harm. Oh yeah, you'll love that.
I should have read that earlier, but I've got that on my bedside table as well. And so I think that brings us on to the fun question.
Fun question, yes. So we thought that since you've been talking about your dream author program, that we'd ask you about your weirdest ever dream, or if you have like a reoccurring strange dream at all.
Well, I'll tell you about my recurring dream. I haven't had it for decades, but when I was a kid, I had a recurring dream that I think I kept having for most of my childhood. And then it just stopped. But it was a terrifying dream. But when I tell you what it is, it won't sound terrifying. And the terrifyingness was all in the mood and the atmosphere, not in the details. So I was either a baby or a toddler, and I was in a pushchair or a pram. And there were these two elderly women called Betty and May. And I knew that I didn't know anyone called Betty or May at all. So I don't think they were based on real people. But these two elderly women, Betty and May, were pushing me along the road in my pram sometimes. Other times they would get me ready to go out in my pram and then push me along. And the stretch of road they pushed me along was very near where I used to live, basically between Withington and Didsbury in Manchester. So they'd be pushing me along there. And before we got as far as Didsbury Village, I would always wake up because it would be too scary. And that was it. Nothing particularly horrific or remarkable, but I just remember feeling massively endangered and that Betty and May did not have my best interest.
Wow,
that does sound scary.
It's easy to see how you went on to write crime novels, I think. What about you, Leslie?
Well, that's funny that you've said that, because I was going to talk about my anxiety dreams I've had in the past, but actually that's reminded me that I had a recurring nightmare as a child, but mine probably does sound a bit even more scarier, I think. I don't know, but my parents had a sort of, it was an understairs cupboard, but they turned it into a little library. They'd sort of put bookshelves in there. And so I was always in this little cupboard looking for books and picking probably very unsuitable books for my age off the shelf and reading them. And I had this dream that I was in there and there was this little wooden doll, like the sort of doll that you got on a toilet roll, but a wooden one, with a big sort of skirt with the hoop in there. And only I knew that this doll was my father and that he'd been trapped in the body of a wooden doll.
That's scary.
That is scary.
And I don't know, I never know with recurring dreams whether they are recurring dreams or when you have them, you think you've had it before. Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure about that. But it seemed to me that I had this dream very often, and I was the only body that knew, and nobody would believe me, and that was my father. So that's brought sort of goosebumps.
Yeah, that's really
So what about you, Lauren? What dreams?
Well, not childhood, but as an adult, I consistently have dreams where I'm a man and just go about my normal business as a man, but also, and I'm a smoker as well. And I never smoke, but in my dreams, I'm a massive smoker. I'm always smoking. I'm always like, I'm getting that release. And I've never smoked. I don't know where it comes from, but I think it must be to do with anxiety that I think I see I sort of associate when you see on films people having that desperate cigarette that perhaps there's some sort of release in it. And I think in my head, I think I need a release. So I'm just a massive smoker and a man, basically, in all my drinks.
Hilarious.
So, a strange one.
Well, sadly, Sophie, that is all we've got time for today, and I'm sure Lauren will agree. We could just sit and chat with you all day, because there are, we could pick your powerhouse brain for forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been an absolute delight having you on, and I strongly recommend to our listeners that they check out your books. If they haven't, they're bound to have read them, but if they haven't, to read them. Certainly your most recent, Haven't They Grown, because it's absolutely brilliant, and The Couple at the Next Table, and also The Couple at the Table, is it, or is that at the next table? The Couple at the Next Table. Let me get the title right.
The Couple at the Table.
The Couple at the Table. Sorry, you can cut that out, Laurie, and of me waffling on. The Couple at the Table, and just sort of check out your website and your podcasts. And if you haven't listened to Sophie's How to Hold a Grudge podcast, I thoroughly recommend that.
I've literally just made a note of it as well. I've got a long list of things from this as well that I've been making notes of. But yes, thank you very much from me as well, Sophie. It's been really inspirational talking to you, and I absolutely know that our listeners are will have a lot of feedback on this episode. They're going to feel exactly the same way. Yeah, we wish you every success with The Couple at the Table. On our next show, we are speaking to the very fabulous Emma Curtis, who is a fan of the show. And we've got written down on our little things that we use. Have we agreed a topic yet? Leslie and I haven't actually discussed this, but I think we have. And I think it's something along the lines of when you know when to give up on a novel, because Emma's going to talk to us a bit about when you're writing and it doesn't feel right, and like how do you know when to give up. So I think that's going to be a much more succinct title than that, but it's going to be along those lines. But for now, it's a very goodbye from Sophie, and it's a goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, and it's a goodbye from me,
and it's goodbye from them.
Bye.